6 days to go now. A week from tomorrow, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are each warning of disaster should their rival win.
Donald Trump has proven himself to be temperamentally unfit and unqualified to be president of the United States.
If Hillary Clinton were to be elected, it would create an unprecedented and protracted constitutional crisis.
Disaster, believe me. Trump and Clinton are taking negative tone in their final appeals to the American people as two of the most unpopular presidential candidates in recent history sprint toward the finish line. Josh Lederman's with us now, White House reporter for the Associated Press. The conventional wisdom is in the last week you show your softer side, you get all fuzzy with the people and tell them how great things are going to be. Where's that?
Well, that's certainly absent from this election cycle. As you mentioned, Shep, typically at this point in time, candidates want to be leaving voters with a closing message that's going to stick in the back of their heads as they're heading into the polls. This is what I'm running for, this is what I stand for, and this is what I'll do for the country. But instead, we see both candidates retrenching behind their most vicious attacks. Trump with the emails, Clinton with allegations of inappropriate behavior towards women. We see her campaigning with Alicia Machado, the former Miss Universe winner. And really it's a reminder to voters not only of how negative this whole campaign has been, but to what extent both candidates are relying on voters disliking their opponent more than they dislike them.
What's your take on this? Is this a good strategy for either, for both?
I think it's inevitable. There's not a lot of alternative, considering that very few voters are heading to the polls because they are voting for a candidate that they truly think is an ideal candidate. We see that from all of the polling this cycle, both candidates extremely unpopular. It's something we're going to be looking at very closely when the exit polls start coming in. How many of Clinton's voters are voting for her because they simply can't bear to cast a vote for Trump and vice versa. And you see both of the candidates really realigning their strategies just in the final few days in terms of what part of the map they are trying to play in based on where they think that case may be the most effective.
We cover these things these days like a horse race. It's really so much bigger than all of that. But while pointing at the horse race, out west in Arizona and Nevada, Donald Trump apparently now has a lead according to the polls. He's still down in Pennsylvania and Florida. Though it feels like everything is tightening here, is it your sense that it is, and does he still have a path?
Well, there are two things that have happened in the final days of this race. One, the polls have tightened. Two, the race has been upended by this new disclosure about Hillary Clinton and the new FBI look into some of her emails. Whether those two things are related, we don't know, and we won't really know until Election Day. But we do see the Trump campaign eyeing opportunities to play in some of those blue-leaning states that really Clinton has been counting as in her category for weeks now, places like New Mexico, Colorado, Wisconsin. And we also see Trump trying to appeal in places that have large minority votes, voters he hasn't been very successful at appealing to so far, while also trying to shore up his support among the places where he does best, places that have a lot of white, rural, blue-collar voters, and if he can get the turnout high enough in those states, he may be able to win them.
And Florida is still in play, for real.
Florida is. You saw Trump campaigning there today. This is one of the closest states in just about every election. It's one that neither candidate feels like they can take for granted. And given the sheer number of electoral votes that are up for grabs there, both candidates feel like it's worth their time and substantial amounts of money on the very expensive airwaves there for them to make a final push there in the final days of the campaign. Got
a prediction of a big surprise that's going to happen that night, a particular state, a particular race?
I think all eyes have been on some of these states like Arizona, which you mentioned, Georgia, and a couple others that have tended to be Republican for years and years and years, but that Democrats are convinced this may be the final year. If any one of those states goes Democratic for the first time, that will be a major indication not only of how weak Trump has been as a Republican nominee, but also potentially about how the shifting demographics in our country may have a major effect on the way that we run races for many years to come.
Very interesting. Josh, thanks a lot. For our viewers, Josh will be joining us in New York on Tuesday night, election night in America, as we host 6-7 hours of election coverage on the Fox Broadcast Network, not this channel, but but the broadcast network, where they have football and Chris Wallace. They'll have us all night. Apologies in advance.